Good morning, everyone. I am having computer tech issues. And I think the storm did something to my internet today. So it's like I have internet for like little bits of time and then it completely goes away. And that makes a Class Connect session almost impossible because then I just keep getting kicked out of it. I tried this morning with my American literature students at the high school and I tried with my homeroom and it just isn't working. But I don't want you to miss out on the important information within today's lesson. So we're going to do like a shortened version of today's lesson, and I'm going to ask you to watch this recording, and then we're actually going to change the exit ticket, and I think that will still get what you need for your learning today, okay? So thank you for being flexible. If you have any questions about the exit ticket, about anything at all, email me and I will be able to help you. After this session, I'm gonna go sit at a Starbucks so I can get I can get the emails as you have them. But it's kind of hard to talk through a session when you're sitting in a public place. So that's why we're gonna do things this way, okay? So the bell ringer today was gonna be to talk a little bit about Maya Angelou's memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Yesterday, you were to read this in your session. And you are, sorry, I'm pausing just to make sure that everything's still recording. And so we read from Maya Angelou's memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It was a little bit longer, but very story-like, and I thought it was just really interesting. My own personal takeaway from this was just her life experiences and how different her lives must have been. They didn't talk a lot about her life with her mom, but you can kind of infer how bad it might have been for her to be needing to stay with her grandmother. And I think the other takeaway that I really had was how this woman really kind of became her teacher and her mentor. She took a special interest in her and really wanted to see her be successful. And I thought that that was really, really impactful as well. So maybe you had some of your own takeaways from the story. One thing that was not made really super clear, but you kind of have to infer it. You have to figure out the clues and the details. You know, the woman who became her mentor, and I'm just going to pull it up really quickly here, so I don't have the story in front of me. I've forgotten her name. I read this last week. How embarrassing is that? Teachers, we forget things? No. So this woman who becomes her mentor, Miss Flowers, she takes a special interest in her, and she wants to teach her how to talk and how to say things. She wants to get her to read words out loud. Maya Angelou was already, or Marguerite at this time, she was already a really avid reader and she loved reading. But because when you kind of get to the end of this passage, you start to realize Marguerite doesn't talk. She doesn't speak. And that's why Miss Flowers is taking this special interest in her. She's saying, read out loud from the text. Let's work on your pronunciation of words so that you can be comfortable speaking out loud. So she goes through this period in her life of not speaking at all. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it's not super clear in the text, so you have to investigate it. But that was another one of my aha takeaway moments was, oh wow, I finally realized right at the end the reason why Miss Flowers is taking this interest in her, and that's to help her speak. So kind of cool. Okay, so today we're going to discuss the memoir. We kind of fulfilled that. We're going to talk about the comparison between Paul Laurence Dunbar's Sympathy, the poem we read, and also then Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I mean, she gets the title from Paul Laurence Dunbar's, poem. So kind of interesting. They are very connected. And then we're going to talk about symbolism a little bit today. And we're going to cover this a little bit more briefly than I wanted to, but that's okay because we'll come back to this skill before you leave at the end of the year. So you'll have what you need before you go to next year. So your goals for today are to compare two texts with a similar theme. We're going to use our close reading strategies a little bit again and cite evidence from the text to show comprehension. So here's Sympathy by Paul Laurence Dunbar again. We talked about this yesterday in our session, but as we look at this passage again, now that we've read Maya Angelou's memoir, we can kind of be thinking about how are these two texts connected? How are they similar in nature? And so we look at, as I'm going to read this out loud, and I'd like you to follow along on your screen. I know why the caged bird feels. Nope. I'm going to go back and reread. Good readers check their understanding, and I checked my understanding and said, oh, that doesn't sound right. I'm going to go back. I know what the caged bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind stirs soft through the springing grass, and the river flows like a stream of glass, when the first bud... Oh, I'm going to go back and check my reading again, sorry. When the first bird sings, and the first bud opes, and the faint perfume from its chalice steals, I know what the caged bird feels. I know why the caged bird beats his wing till its blood is red on the cruel bars, for he must fly back to his perch and cling, when he fain would be on the bough a swing. And a pain still throbs in the old scars, and they pulse again with a keener sting. I know why why he beats his wing. Sorry, I am not doing a very good job at this read aloud right now. That's okay. Sometimes, even really good readers, sometimes we're just like, whoa, I'm not on my game. I need to refocus. So I'm going to do that for this last stanza. I know why the caged bird sings, ah, me, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and he would be free. It's not a carol of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the caged bird sings. Okay, so we're looking back at Maya Angelou's memoir. We recognize that she's not speaking. For some reason in her life, maybe it's because of her experiences with her mom, or she's had something that's happened to her, she's choosing not to speak right now out loud. And she hides herself in her books. And so in a lot of ways, and we remember the time period that Maya Angelou is growing up in, kind of thinking, how do these two texts connect? Why is this the title of her memoir? Okay, so be thinking about that. So the questions that I want to talk about today, and again, we're just going to go over this a little bit more briefly today, but what is the message or theme of Maya Angelou's memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings? What does she want you to know more than anything else in the world as she's writing this story to you? Be thinking about that. And so here's a place where we would have done some partner sharing and then shared out together as a class. Okay, but what does she want you to know more than anything else in the world? There's a couple of things that you can learn throughout the text, like what is that life lesson, right? And a couple of things Maya's trying to say, our experiences can make us feel caged inside, right? So her experiences with her mom being so negative had shut her down from the rest of the world. But when somebody took a special interest in her, when somebody helped her to set herself free, she could do so. She could speak again, and she could share her thoughts out with the world again. In a lot of ways, she used her books as a way to cage herself in as well, to become parts of another world and not experience her own. And so in a lot of ways, she's trying to share with you this message or this theme of letting yourself not be caged. Don't cage yourself in, right? She also wants to share with you some of the ways that people generally felt caged in together. When I'm not sure if you can see these Skype messages popping up. I apologize. I hope you can't. They're distracting me. But so that's kind of her message or her theme, that she wants to talk about not only how she caged herself in, but how as society she felt caged in. If you look at some of the experiences of the people she talks about in her memoir, the farmers who are struggling to get by, and how they feel caged in by having to go out and farm, kind of knowing they weren't going to get enough money to survive from that experience. Really not a good experience. So they felt in a lot of ways caged as well. And then we talk about the message or the theme in Paul Laurence Dunbar's Sympathy, right? Where he's kind of making a more, literal reference to a bird being caged. But of course, that bird being caged is not really about a bird in a cage, right? It's about the African American people in 1899 when he wrote this and how they feel caged. This is their experience, and he's using this symbol, which we're going to talk about in just a second, of this bird being caged to give you that idea, okay? And so in this way, we can kind of see how these two texts are connected. We can see why Maya Angelou may have grabbed the title of Paul Laurence Dunbar's poem for her own memoir, to show this connection, right? Basically what that's called, when an author wants you to think about another text, another poem, another story, when they want you to think about another text or story inside their story, it's called an allusion. It means they're alluding to something previous, and they want you to know and understand what that is because there's some kind of deep connection there. And we're going to talk more about allusions, not today, but that's what that actually is. It's an allusion. So Maya Angelou alludes to Paul Laurence Dunbar's poem so that you can connect the two and say, oh, she's feeling caged. She cages herself. Society is caging her. The situation is caging her. Right? And so you can make those connections together. Okay. So we're going to go over what is a symbol. Okay. And you may be familiar with this already, and this might be new to you. Both are okay. A symbol is an object that represents an abstract idea. Okay. So it's an actual physical thing, but it's going to represent something else, like has a bigger meaning to it. Okay, so if you think about like a rose, what might a rose symbolize? Think about that for a second. If you think about maybe Valentine's Day or giving roses to somebody you care about, what does that mean, right? Roses symbolize love. Love is abstract. It's this big idea, right? Feeling. There's not a physical thing that you can hold on to when you say love. But a rose, well, that's physical. That's a thing. And we use a rose to talk about love, love, right? Symbolism allows writers to develop and explore ideas in a way that engage or kind of give interest to the reader, okay? So for example, what would the apple symbolize in Snow White? So if you're not familiar with the story, Snow White is a princess, and she's given this poisonous apple by an evil person. I think she's a witch. I'm not sure what she is exactly, but she gives her the apple to poison her because she wants her not to live anymore. So in this case, an apple is going to symbolize poison or death or hate, right? But if you give a teacher an apple, what is that? They're very different, I hope. I hope they're very different. Okay, so when we think about symbols in a story, so we look at in this first stanza here, Paul Laurence Dunbar says, I know how the caged bird feels, and then he goes on to include several images or symbols of freedom. Okay, can you identify these symbols of freedom as you reread? So remember, freedom is a feeling. It's something that's abstract. It's not something we can hold. Okay, but what are some symbols of freedom? Okay, in this country, it might be an American flag. We might count that as a symbol of freedom. Okay, but a bird is a symbol of freedom because what can they do? They can fly free. They fly all over. Nothing holds them back or holds them in, except of course when they're caged. Okay. So I know what the caged bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind stirs soft through the springing grass. So what is he talking about? He's talking about all these things out there in the world that show how a bird can feel free. Okay? When the first bird sings and the first bud opes, and the faint perfume from its chalice steals, I know what the caged bird feels. Okay, so all of these are, in this first stanza, are trying to show you what a bird might experience when they're free, when they're flying free out there in the world. Okay? So taking a look at the second stanza of the poem, the bird is described as beating its wings against the cage and injuring itself. I know why the caged bird beats his wing till its blood is red on the cruel bars. So again, these are now new symbols, right? He's not actually talking about a bird, physically beating itself on the bars. These are new symbols showing you kind of the opposite of what freedom looks like and feels like. All of these are symbols. For he must fly back to his perch and cling, when he fain would be on a bough a swing. And a bough is like a tree branch, right? So he would be out on a tree branch, just flowing in the breeze with the branches swinging. And a pain still throbs in the old scars, and they pulse again with a keener sting. I know why he beats his wing. Okay, again, so we have this symbol of a bird inside of a cage beating on the bars. Okay, but it's not actually a bird in a cage beating on the bars, right? What is it telling you, right? So why does the speaker identify with this action? So in this case, you're going to reflect on the speaker, who is Paul Laurence Dunbar. He's an African American in this time period. Okay, he identifies with this as something that he's trying to do. He's beating against this cage that's holding him back. The inequalities and the racism and the injustices hold him back, and he's beating against it until he's, until he's bleeding. Okay, but not physically, right? Just kind of mentally, right? And so what does the bird's willingness to injure itself in a futile attempt to escape tell you about how desperate the bird is, right? And futile just means nothing's going to happen. It's worth, it's kind of like a worthless attempt. It won't work, right? But it does it anyway. The bird does it anyway. He beats his wings because he wants to be free, even though he doesn't feel like he will ever be free. Okay, so it kind of shows you how desperate this speaker is for freedom in his own life. Okay, kind of sad when you think about it on a deep level like that. So bird equals a symbol of freedom. And so this case, my reflection for you is to consider, why might a bird be considered a symbol of freedom, right? When you think about that for a little bit, why might a bird be a symbol of freedom? Because they can fly free wherever they want to roam, wherever they want to go. Nothing holds them back, nothing stops them. They can swerve up and down, in and out, between and in, through. There's no barriers for them, right? So it's a symbol of freedom. Okay, but if a caged bird is a symbol of freedom, or a caged bird is a symbol of what, right? Kind of the opposite of that feeling, okay? So my task for you today was going to be a pretty challenging one. I think we're actually going to have to not probably experience this today, but this caged bird cannot fly, but it can sing. What do you think the song symbolizes, and why? And so I was going to ask you to cite specific lines and phrases and words from the poem to support your answer. And I was going to give you this graphic organizer, but I think we're actually going to go ahead and skip that. But I want you to think about this, right? What do you think the song that he sings at the last stanza? In the last stanza, he sings this song, and he sends this song up to heaven, right? Up to the heavens above. Is this song, like la da 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 da, I'm so happy? Probably not, right? What does it symbolize? It symbolizes desperation, a prayer, a hope for change, a begging for change. Okay. So if we were going to go back and we were going to pull quotes from the text, we could definitely use a lot of lines from that last stanza as a quote to show how desperate the speaker feels about being free. Okay, what we're going to do instead, and so here's the graphic organizer we were going to do. We will use this. We will come back to this skill, so please don't worry about that. Instead, what I'm going to ask you to do, this is going to be your exit ticket for watching this recording. Your exit ticket for today is actually going to be to go take your STAR 360 test. The emails did come out yesterday. They did go to both you and your learning coach. So you do have all of the login information that you need to take the STAR 360 test. So instead of this long graphic organizer, what I'm going to have you do instead is to go to your emails, log in with the instructions that are on your email, make sure you follow those directions really carefully, and then take the STAR 360 test and do your best on that. It should take you maybe 20 25 minutes to do, okay? But take your time on it and do your very best. And then that's how you're going to get attendance for this session today, is by actually taking that test. And then I'll go in and look on Sunday night and see if you've taken the test. And if you have, you'll get attendance for our class today. Okay, so that's going to be our session for the day. That's all we have. If you have any questions, please email me. If I don't get back to you right away, it's just purely because of my internet issues, but I will pop on as soon as I can get internet connecting in my house, and we'll get things figured out, okay? And we do have someone coming out to fix things, so we should be good to go here going forward, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day.